Good morning. The date is January 28th, 2020. This is the regularly scheduled executive committee meeting. My name is Jacob Fry. I'm the chair of this committee, and I am joined by a quorum of council members, Gordon, Council President Bender, Council Vice President Jenkins, and Council Member Johnson. Let the record reflect that we do, in fact, have a quorum. We have 6 items on the agenda for today, and then we have a closed item agenda item as well. The first item is the appointed position in the Finance Department, which is a manager of investments and debt management. And
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brenda Miller. I'm the compensation analyst for the city. I will be addressing items 1 through 3 on today's agenda. These positions all report up through Mark Ruff, so he's here as well to answer questions, and he'll go into more detail around item number 3. The first agenda item is a request for approval of a new appointed position titled the Manager of Investments and Debt Management, and referral of this position to the City Council for final approval. The Manager of Investments and Debt Management will report to the Director of Investments and Debt Management. The position will assist with the management, selection, reporting of cash and liquid investments in order to meet the city's financial obligations in a timely and cost-effective manner. It will also be a key resource for planning and administering debt instruments to finance the city's capital projects and other funding priorities. The points for this position are 498. The salary for the new position is $94,000 to $111,400. The position is included in the city's 2020 budget. The Manager of Investments and Debt Management meets the appointing criteria put forth in the Minnesota Code of Ordinances, Section 2010-10, City Council to establish positions. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any questions for staff on item number 1? Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this question really is more general to items 1, 2, and 3. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure who is appropriate to answer it. But I wondered if there has been an overall look at the different grades for these kind of division director level appointments. I know if you just look at a list, there's quite a large range. And I'm not sure that, if they've been updated kind of all together. We're just sort of doing them piece by piece. But I think it's concerning for, division directors in different departments as they look at the list and see where they're at versus some of their counterparts.
Well, President Benner, we recognize that there is a need to take a broader look at the appointed positions. And so we anticipate doing that starting within the next couple of months.
That's wonderful. And I think the result is that you end up seeing department directors that are below division directors in some cases. And if that's the case, being able to kind of legitimize why it is. But thank you. I appreciate that. I'll go ahead and move this first item. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes. Item number 2 is the appointed position in the 911 department, the Director of Minneapolis Emergency Communications Center. Ms. Miller.
Yeah. This position will report to the Deputy City Coordinator, and we'll talk about that next, and oversees all aspects of emergency communications for the city's 911 system. The position was recently reevaluated, and as a result, the points for this position have increased from 665 to 688, or 23 points. The grade increased from grade 14 to grade 15. The new salary for the position ranges from $130,800 to $155,100. The new grade and salary structure will result in an approximate increase in total comp expenses, that's including fringe benefits, of $9,400 per year, which is not in the city's 2020 budget. The Director of MECC continues to meet the appointed criteria put forth in the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Section 2010-10, City Council to establish positions. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Miller? Seeing none, I'll move approval of item number 2. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes. Item number 3 is the appointed position in the City Coordinator's Office, the Deputy City Coordinator focusing on engagement. Ms. Miller.
This position reports to the city coordinator and will bring like functions together for more efficient and effective service delivery. Specifically, it will be responsible for overseeing the departments of communication, neighborhood, and community relations 311 and 911. And Mark will discuss this position in more detail when I'm finished here. The points for this position are 778. The salary for the new position ranges from $148.3 thousand to $175.8 thousand. While the position is not specifically included in the city's 2020 budget, existing funds will be found in the budget to cover the expense. The Deputy City Coordinator engagement meets the appointed criteria set forth in the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, Section 201010, the City Council to establish positions. So now Mark will provide some more information about the position.
Mr. Ruff.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Executive Committee, I'm Mark Ruff, the Interim City Coordinator. We have a brief PowerPoint I'd like to review with you that highlights just what I consider to be a very exciting new position within the city that I think will bring transformation to not just the coordinator departments, but more importantly, externally for our residents, and then also for a resource of our other charter departments as well as the City Council. The new structure, as Brenda outlined, is fairly simple, which is to have 4 current coordinator departments that report up to the coordinator directly, now report to an engagement deputy. There is a 5th area, which is in the budget in December of 2019, where new positions for the public service area in the new building. And those new positions would report up through this position as well. We will determine whether those are brought into one of those departments. That would be a more likely scenario. But right now, I just want to say that engagement generally includes not only these traditional departments, but this very exciting part of the new building in terms of enhancing our services to residents. Specifically, the benefits that we see is, and I mentioned this to many of you individually as I took on the interim coordinator role, which is currently the coordinator has too many direct reports, and that the work that's accumulated over time with expectations of more rapid response, I think has left those departments that are reporting up through this position lacking in resources and direction at times. And that's not a criticism of the more immediate predecessors in the coordinator's position as much as it is just a general expectation growth within the enterprise as a whole. And also the fact that the world's changing, and particularly around communication, technology and communication, as you all aware, how people want to be engaged. I think the expectation is that we are not at a steady state, and that will continue to change. So what that says is we need somebody who full-time pays attention to engagement strategy for the enterprise as a whole. I would also say that there is inconsistency just by the nature of projects, and when I talk about projects, it could be a CPED development project, a public works street project. There's some inconsistency and lack of, again, resources for departments that gives best practices to how do we engage residents when we undertake these more regular types of projects within a city. And so there is, depending on who the project manager is, there is some variation on those approaches, and that can be confusing for residents at times as well in even the same neighborhood or different neighborhoods across the enterprise. And lastly, certainly you as elected officials and your staff, I think with this position we'll be able to better alert constituents, better be able to react to questions that arise and have more options for ward engagement through this position. I don't want to be over-promising what this new person's going to be doing, but clearly there are those areas which, again, as I serve as a resource, which are other departments, elected officials, and the residents themselves. What is it about now that would bring about the need for this change? And I think I just listed some of the activities, and that's probably a word that's not big enough for what's going on in the city right now, but there are a number of initiatives within the city which are going to accelerate the pace of engagement. Clearly, the website, I think, is a major change for the enterprise, and but it's a tool, and how we use that tool it's only going to be effective by careful guidance. Right now, there is a staff direction around engagement. There's a consultant that's been hired and working with NCR and the coordinator's office around inventorying how we engage. How do you define engagement within the city right now? Clearly, the Neighborhoods 2020 and the Community Connections Conference coming up on Saturday is going to be a big discussion around engagement. If you read the communications audit that was done recently by Padilla, there was not good news for the enterprise in some ways in terms of populations of our residents don't feel engaged by us as an enterprise right now. And so what are ways that we can better reach people for the things that they need? I would also say in the enterprise, there is a variety of growth of communications and engagement staff within each department. And again, how do we bring best practices to those folks as they work with their own individual departments to tailor the engagement strategy? We mentioned the new public service building and then certainly the Minneapolis 2040 plan. So this is not a new concept in terms of these departments working together. In fact, this is not a forced marriage. This is drawn out of work that is already happening between NCR and Communications 311. They work together on a regular basis. This is just bringing intentionality to those efforts. Certainly other parts of the enterprise will clearly be involved. What the clerk's office does on engagement is very important. The work that's going on around the census right now with NCR and a variety of departments is another example of work that's being done in partnership. Again, this just brings more intentionality and leadership to those efforts. And why can't we do this within the existing structure? I think it's always important to ask as elected officials, you challenge us to say, why do you always have to create just another FTE to accomplish something, right? And so I feel like it's important to answer that very direct question. One, as I mentioned, 12 direct reports to a coordinator on top of working with 14 elected officials and the charter departments in today's world of needing an answer tomorrow is not realistic and not sustainable for any coordinator. And that's true for 5 months from now or 5 years from now. Specifically, as we work through this engagement staff direction, we come up with a policy and strategy. Who's actually going to be the champion of that? And I think this position would enable a response that's adequate to you as elected officials to that question. And I think just generally, departments themselves would say that right now there is an isolation, pockets of engagement, and I think oftentimes we get questions from departments about how can I better do this? And clearly, our communications department is very good about putting together communications plans, but communications isn't always a true full engagement process. And so what happens then is, these internal departments, as well as the charter departments, oftentimes will not have a best practices methodology that they can turn to and the resources to be able to say within a week or 2 or 3, how am I going to undertake an engagement process for whether it's a 2-week project or a 2-year project. So those are the rationale as to why I don't see the ability to work within the current structure. We certainly can get by, but this is too important of an effort. I think you've all made this a very important effort over your directions as elected officials through our budgetary and staff directions coming from all of your offices, not to at least bring this effort forward, and certainly would happy to answer any questions or certainly willing to listen to other options that we should pursue before moving forward with this.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff, Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you, and I think this makes a good deal of sense. The one question that I have, and I think asked when we talked too, was wouldn't we wait and do this until after there's a new city coordinator that comes on board? Because there's a concern that there'll be more restructuring that they want to do. But I also understand that there's a desire to kind of get things set so that we line things up for success for a new person when they come in. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I think one of the things this shows is how we as a council and policymakers have been putting more into the city coordinator's office than was there before. It's been a lot smaller, and as we've come up with new ideas and new things, and we think that's where it belongs, it's gone there. I'm actually excited about focusing more on engagement, participating in the Neighborhoods 2020 effort. One of the things that kept coming up was, well, what do we do so that all the departments throughout the city can be more consistent and more effective in terms of community engagement? And I think that's a big question. I also think when we started 311, we imagined that was going to provide such informative data. It would help us, provide more guidance to department heads and to the city and policymakers about what we need to do to respond to that and what kind of metrics we could measure for success. And I think 311's been enormously successful, especially on solving a lot of problems and providing ways for constituents to contact the city and residents and visitors as well. But we could use a little more work to raise up some of the information to better inform maybe the policies and decisions that we make at a higher level. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. And is the idea that we'd have somebody hired in this position before the new city coordinator, or is this something that will, I think I know the answer to this, but just to clarify, or something that we will wait and allow the new individual to make this hire?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gordon, to your point, we would wait to hire the long-term engagement position until after a city coordinator is named, so that person who is the city coordinator can choose their team. In the interim, may appoint someone to start this process and help bring this this work together, and likely would be one of the department heads within that group. So not somebody from the outside, but just instead of just create it and then not have any momentum moving into the next stage, that would be an option as well to pursue.
And that makes me want to ask this question, and maybe the mayor is better suited to answer it. What's the timeline for bringing forward a name for a city coordinator's position? Or can we get a little update on how that's
Sure.
going?
Answer to Councilmember Gordon, we've been engaging in a process to both recruit and search for the best possible city coordinator, council vice president, as well as Councilmember Palmisano have been involved in interviews, as have I. And we've been sort of narrowing the pool of applicants to those that are most adept. I can't tell you more online given privacy and personnel issues, but I anticipate some form of recommendation to come forward in the, I would say in the next month or two.
Thank you.
Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I think this is a really good change, and I'm very supportive. I think this has come up, this kind of overall theme that Mr. Ruff was discussing specific to this position has come up a lot over the recent years, especially as we look at the role of neighborhood organizations in our community engagement, but also as we take on the communications audit and potential recommendations coming forward and changes related to communications. So I think it's really good to start to look at this more holistically in a more integrated way, so we understand how our city departments are doing engagement, how the communications and NCR departments fit into that, how community organizations, including our neighborhood organizations, fit in or are expected to fit in. So I think this is a great change and really underscores our commitment to doing a better job of engaging our community. I think, having this single point of leadership will really help us stay accountable as we really work to continue to improve, and especially in engaging communities that, haven't always been engaged. So thanks.
I also agree this is a smart administrative move. I think this is a more strategic reporting structure. And as Mr. Ruff stated, this is not a forced marriage. This is a marriage of love and romance. So I'll go ahead and move this action forward. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes. The next item is number 4. It's a Civil Service Commission appointment, considering my nomination to reappoint Macy Wheeler, seat 3, for a 3-year term, beginning March 1st, 2020, and ending February 28th, 2023. I will go ahead and move this appointment forward. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes. Item number 5 is the reappointment of the Director of Emergency Management. Considering my nomination to reappoint Barrett Lane to the appointed position of Director of Emergency Management for a 2-year term beginning January 2nd, 2020, and referring the appointment to the City Council for the setting of a public hearing. I will move this item forward. Any discussion on Mr. Barrett Lane's reappointment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes. The final item on our open agenda is the reappointment of the City Assessor. Considering the nomination to reappoint Patrick Todd to the appointed position of the City Assessor for a 2-year term and referring it to the City Council for the setting of a public hearing. I will go ahead and move this item forward. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That item passes, and we are adjourned to the closed session.